Hi, this is Phil, Dirty Drive Away. I thought I'd run a quick video as I've had a few people asking about my 400 litre water tank. This is my water tank, it's 400 litres. I think it was made by Eco Shore or something like that. This is in the back of my long wheelbase Transit Connect, which is obviously the high top version. Obviously I've had a few people asking about the sizings and stuff like that. Oh, I want to chuck a 400 litres in. Now obviously these tanks are beastly, they're very tall and they're also really wide. If you can see, obviously on my high top I don't have a great deal of room between the top of the tank and the top of the door here to get it in. Obviously being a high top version it is slightly taller than the conventional one, so obviously if you've got a normal Transit Connect you may find that the roof kind of stops, you know, around here somewhere, and you may find you've got a slightly shorter door, in which case you may not get these 400 litre tanks in. So obviously do your measurements properly. I'll just quickly show you around the back. See in the back of my van, a bit messy because I'm working today. You can see obviously it's quite wide. It only just about sort of really fits in the width, because you can see where the top of the van starts to curve in at the top. So if it goes much taller, it's not really going to fit. So on this long wheelbase, it's a perfect fit. It does take up a lot of room. It's very heavy when it's full. It's about 400 plus kilos. Obviously 400 litres of water is 400 kilos plus the weight of the tank. It's obviously baffled to stop a little bit of the sloshing. Go back around the front. People have been asking me about, oh, how do you connect it up, that kind of stuff. Well, I use a ball valve. That's a Rojo ball valve in there. They're used for agricultural use, for filling up water troughs and stuff. Very high flow, a lot higher flow than a conventional, I think it's a Part 2 ball valve, high pressure ball valve. So that obviously comes out the front, and I split mine into two. So you've got two garden hoses. Today I'm only using one. But obviously it's just a brass wire piece, and I put on these clear inline filters. I'm not sure you'll be able to see. If I try and zoom in, it's going to be a bit echo in here. Let's try and see if I can zoom or focus. There we go. Look, you can see in here, all that in there is just the grit and the sand. I won't get any closer. That there is the grit and the sand that's come out of the tap and the hose. Now you don't realise how much actually comes out of a garden hose or out of a garden external garden tap. That there just goes to show you how much actually comes out, and what you don't end up doing is that going into your tank and going into your pump. So I've got one on each side. I believe they're 3/4 inch inline filters. And then down here, obviously I've got my washer in the back of the van. There is obviously, as standard, if you look, you can't see the filter, but in here there is a filter in there. But again, it's not a particularly fine filter. They're only designed to stop sort of larger particles. Also down here on the tank you will get a 1 inch female BSP thread into the tank. And obviously on this is my suction hose. I've obviously just used male to male. This is a 1 inch T-handle ball valve into a 90 degree. Then obviously my suction hose goes up and in straight into the inlet side of the pump here, so obviously through that filter. In these ball valves there are, again, there's another little filter in there, but again they're only designed to stop sort of larger particles, you know, sort of smaller stones, that kind of stuff. They're not really fine enough to stop against sand and grit. Obviously when I've done it this way, you'll find that when you buy your washer it'll come with one of those really sort of large inlet strainers. Obviously on this, unless you went through the lid at the top, you're not going to be able to use that. So obviously just to be safe than sorry, I've got filters pretty much everywhere. Also I've been questioned about the return to tank bypass. You'll see, if I can get this in here, there's my unloader valve, with obviously my pressure gauge on there. This bit here is my exit, my bypass. Sometimes they loop back into the pump, but this is the return to tank bypass. So obviously this hose here is your return to tank. So obviously you'll see that will come all the way up into a 90 degree plastic elbow. These are under quite a bit of pressure when they come out. So obviously I've siliconed all of this in, make sure this is nice and tight. So when this is running, you know, the jet that comes out there is quite intense. Obviously, if this goes to waste, so if you've got this poking out your van, you're going to lose a lot of water. Every time you let off the trigger, any water that comes out here is going to be wasted. So that's why it's called return to tank. So as soon as you let off the trigger, you're not wasting any water. It's going straight back into the tank. So you can see my ball valve there. The tank is now full. Ball valve shut off. Couple of tips for you if you are buying one of these. These come with a, I think it's either an 8 or a 9-inch lid, not too sure exactly. Now these aren't sealed, these are vented on the top, so obviously to allow air in and out. If you're travelling, if you're driving and you've got water in these tanks, although they're baffled, the water will still slosh, and you'll find that you'll end up, you'll just chuck water out the top of these lids, something wicked, and you end up with a wet van. So what I done is I took my lid and I siliconed it up to stop the water from coming out, and also you'll see on the actual the lid here, these are riveted in, but again they're not sealed. So I've just run some clear silicone all around the outside to seal it up, because you'll get the water sloshes up from the inside and comes out here, and it just drips everywhere. It goes all down the side of the tank, and the last thing you really want in your van is obviously little puddles of water, because you start asking yourself, well, where's it coming from? And obviously the last thing you want to end up trying to do is, think, oh, have I got a leak on the washer? Have I got a connection that's going, or something like that? So the less amount of water you can have floating around your van, the better. So yeah, seal all this up, and obviously when you're filling it up or when you're using it, just crack the lid off, because it needs a little bit of airflow into it. So obviously you don't get too much pressure. It's quite a loose fitting lid, unless you tighten it down. So I normally just crack it off. That's fine, just to allow a little bit of air in. Yeah, so that's that really. I mean, you can see there's not a lot of room between here and the roof. I've got my auto reel sits on top of that, but that wouldn't fit if I had the short wheel base version of this van. There wouldn't be enough room I don't think, between here and the roof. Not too sure, don't know the dimensions. But obviously you need access to this lid, so if you've got the shorter wheelbase Transit that's obviously not as high, you may not be able to get access to the lid. So bear that in mind if you're thinking about putting one of these inside your van. And also bear in mind, like I said to you about the weight of the water and the maximum payload of the van. Some of the smaller vans have got a lot less payload. You should be able to find that on your sticker somewhere. It'll be on one of the inside door jambs. It may tell you what the maximum payload or the maximum weight that you can carry is, and obviously you need to make sure that you're kind of abide by that, because don't forget, a full tank of water is 400 kilos, and obviously the weight of your washer and all the other miscellaneous bits and pieces that you've got in the van could well exceed the actual payload weight of the vehicle. So bear that in mind. I think these long wheelbase Transit Connects, I think these have got a payload of about 900 kilos, so it's yeah, pretty good for all the amount of crap that I carry in my van. But it's all good crap, it all gets used. It's all comes in really handy. And obviously the bigger the van you have, the more space you've got for just extra bits and pieces you can chuck in here. And you'll see what I meant up there by my whirl away lives on the roof of the van. You have seen that in other videos. I say you don't have to have a tank this size, you can get away with a smaller tank. You'll see in one of my first videos I've done, I think it was the one on what pressure washer do I use, you'll see that I used to have a orangey coloured water butt here instead, which was about 220 litres. That worked really well, but obviously I found that the water supply was running out after about sort of 35-40 minutes. So yeah, that's it really. The good thing about these, you can buy them in sort of different colours, black, greys, browns. This is clear. Obviously these markings I've just put on here, it's not an exact science. I've just kind of split the tank into 4. But the good thing with the clear ones is, you might not be able to see in the video, you can see just there, you can see where the water level is. Obviously when you've got the ball valve in and it's working properly, you're not going to get the tank right to the very top. So you'll see here, it's roughly 300 litres. So I'm probably got about 375 litres in there. And obviously the only slight disadvantage to these big large square ones is because of where the outlet is down here. It'd pretty go the same even if you're using a suction hose. But obviously once you get below this level, all the water across here is not going to be usable. So yeah, so obviously you can only use the water up to what the bottom sort of 2 inches of this. So you could lose 30 odd litres of water just in the bottom bit here. But if you've got good flow, it should work really well. These are really quite thick tanks. They're Yeah, they're nice and thick. They've got to be. Obviously, they're holding quite a. I don't think I can show you how thick it is. But I mean, you've got some baffles in there. They're probably about I don't know, 5 to 8 mil thick, I'd say, something like that. So yeah, just do your measurements. Just double check that the measurements they're supplying you are actually the external measurements. Some of them I found they were showing you the internal measurements, which obviously you have to add some. But yeah, I couldn't tell you exactly what the height and depth and width of this tank is at the moment. I don't have a tape measure on me. But if I do find a tape measure, I will post it in the description. Sorry, one little addition I thought I'd add before I sign off on this video. These connections down here, these BSP connections, you'll find they're not a particularly tight fit, so you're going to need to put some kind of sealer on them. Some people use PTFE tape. Now, I'm not a huge fan of PTFE tape, so what I've done is I've blue Loctited this in here, only purely because you need it at a certain angle to go into your inlet, and the chances of you being able to nip this up tight enough to get a good seal at the exact angle you need is going to be pretty darn slim. So basically I connected all this up and I just blue Loctited it, so you can still undo it if need be. I did try a little bit of PTFE tape to start with, but I kept getting small little drips, and to be honest I couldn't be bothered keep faffing about, taking it on, taking it off, and so I thought everything here has just been blue Loctited. I mean, I blue Loctite everything. I don't take the risk with PTFE tape because it's going to go at some stage. So yeah, that's your best advice on that. Some people have also asked me in previous ones, they've seen this, why do I fit a ball valve here? Obviously you can isolate the water from the tank. You will find that during the winter time, if you don't empty your tank off, or you've got a little bit of water down here, you will find that obviously if we get a cold spell, the water in the bottom of the tank and in the pipe and up into your filter is going to freeze. So what I like to do at the end of the season is obviously I can shut this off, just drain the water out of my suction hose, out of my pump, so I know there's no water in there that's going to freeze or damage it. And also, obviously you've got no other way of emptying the water tank out if you need to. So obviously you can isolate it here, you can then disconnect it off of here, obviously take the hose out, stick it outside to the ground, crank your tap on, and obviously you'll empty your tank off. I had the problem with my previous tank with the 220 litre water tank. The only way to empty it would be to actually use the washer to empty it, so you'd have to fire the washer up and wait for the washer to drain it all off for you, which could take a little bit of time. And inevitably, obviously, this van is quite old. It's done 115,000 miles. A couple of years ago it did break down. I lost an alternator in the middle of nowhere. Obviously you call out the recovery people, they turn up, and a lot of the times when they come out, you say it's a Transit Connect, they just send you out a normal sort of loader to pick up the vehicle. If you've got a full tank of water on here, you've got 400 litres or whatever you carry, you'll probably find the actual weight of the vehicle may exceed what they can actually carry, so you may need to obviously discharge all the water in the tank, and that will be the quickest way to do it. You can just crack off your Jubilee clip, pull it out, twist your water on, and this thing will empty off in about 15 minutes, and it'll empty a damn sight quicker than pretty much what the jet wash can do. Otherwise you're having to run the jet wash on full power just to empty it off. So it's a good little thing to have, very, very handy. Obviously it's got a built-in filter as well, so any little bits do happen to get into your tank will stop going in there, and obviously you can undo it from the bottom and you take the filter out. Same as the one in your strainer piece, you can take that out as well and give it a clean, which I always do at the end of the season. Yeah, that's it really. Final tip I can say is I've heard not putting 90-degree elbows on your inlet pipe, which is here. You want this to be straight. You'll find obviously I've got a 90-degree here, which is fine because you've got a clear hose, so you can see the water in the hose. But you'll tend to find obviously when this is sucking water in, if you've got a 90-degree elbow, sometimes you can get air trapped in the 90-degree, and if you get air in there, sometimes it can make the pump stutter. So it's best to have this on a straight. These all use 1 inch straight connections. You may have to reduce them down eventually to get them in. You'll see another video I've done on connections. You'll see some of the reductions here. I think it goes from a 1 inch down to I think it's like a ½ inch or something in the pump in here, so you'd need like a 1 inch to a ½ inch, but this will be on your washer when you buy it anyway. It should have a straight on it, but obviously it would be nicer with this to have a 90 degree, because you wouldn't have this hose in the way here. You kind of have it coming up here and it would stick out here and you could run it in. But I like to try and avoid 90 degree elbows if I can. So yeah, that's it. A little addition there. Right, this is me. I am signing off. I've got work to do. Take it easy. Happy cleaning.